Recently Zuma in South Africa resigned, as leader of the country. I've been doing some research on South Africa just because I'm curious about it, and because a lot of right-wing YouTubers have been talking about South Africa. So Lauren Southern, I believe, kind of started this. So Lauren Southern, she went down to South Africa to kind of profile the white farmers, because in recent years there have been, a huge number of farm attacks. So you have these white farmers who live in rural areas. Black South Africans will come onto their farms and sometimes murder them and brutally rape women and et cetera, et cetera. And, Lauren Southern was profiling this because she feels like it's underreported in the media. But anyway, so this has kind of spurred on other discussion about South Africa and, in the far right YouTube community. Like Stefan Molyneux, he interviewed a guy from South Africa about how the country's economy is doing so hot. And this guy believes that South Africa is headed towards like a race war. And, Stefan brought up some interesting points about South Africa. It's okay. The first thing I want to talk about is, so I was doing some research about Zuma, who resigned, and there's this one thing. So there used to be this song, Shoot the Boer. So obviously the Boers were, these white people in South Africa, right? There was this clip of Zuma singing the song, and it's a really catchy song, and Zuma's actually a decent singer. And I just thought it was kind of interesting. Black Pigeon Speaks included this song in his video about South Africa. I just kept listening to the song because I found it so fascinating. So Zuma was at a political rally, and he was singing this song, shoot the Boer, I'll shoot him with my machine gun, shoot. But he's speaking it, in another language. I just thought it was hilarious. What do you think about that?
So Lauren Southern's friend, one of our favorite people on this podcast, Theron Meyer, she actually gave a comment on it. So it was kind of bullshit as a person who's a Boer who grew up in South Africa.
Okay. So what else did Theron Meyer say?
She's kind of briefly mentioned it. So I'd like to see her actually make a response to Lauren Southern if she actually feels strongly against it. Because she literally is a Boer who grew up in South Africa, spent most of her young life in South Africa. But I was thinking about this. Are you familiar with Atheism is Unstoppable?
Yes.
They actually had a podcast a while back with his father, and his father grew up in South Africa. Actually, Devin Tracy, Atheism Unstoppable, his family is like South African. Father was talking when he worked on, it was like his father was uncle's farm. And they're talking basically about how like they just gave them just enough to live, essentially. A lot of people would say like, oh, well, why didn't you pay them like a decent wage? And the person said, well, if I give them a bunch of money, they'll have a lot of money and they'll just buy like a bicycle and they'll drive away and then they'll be gone. And then they won't be productive anymore. And just a bunch of other stuff about like how they couldn't invite them to dinner because, people who worked, they lived like polygamous, non-traditional Western lives. There was no way to integrate them into our Western society. So the best thing would just be a separate existence.
Yeah, it is interesting. But I think what's going on here is this meme, black IQ being far lower than white IQ. And that's what these right-wingers believe. These two groups, because of this IQ difference, are so incompatible. The crazy thing is why that doesn't make sense is even using their evidence as far as IQ, and sometimes they'll even admit it, the distribution, the variation within a race, even they will admit, even by their own data that they believe to be accurate, the variation within a race is much greater than the difference between the races. I think South Africa is interesting because it's pretty much the opposite of what we have in the United States, right? In the United States, white people are, 2/3 of the country, and, blacks make up about 15%, 12%, something like this. While in South Africa, blacks make up about 80% and whites make up about 10%. Because of South Africa's colonial past, this is a stat I just found the other day. White people, the average income of a white person is in South Africa is 5 times as much as the average black person's income. So for a white person, it's around 38,000. For a black person, it's around 8,000. That's a huge difference, right? It's not even close to that. I think it's less than 2 times in the United States. The inequality in South Africa is much more extreme than what we have here in the United States. And I feel like that creates such a racial resentment. White people and black people in South Africa are leading just dramatically different lives, right? So black people are struggling to even have the black people are having like a third world existence in South Africa. White people are having, just a regular first world existence. While in the US, it's more like Black people are having a kind of shitty but still first world existence, and white people are having a first world existence. So South Africa is really interesting in that respect.
There was buildings, for example, where like these people would live years and years ago, which, had like electricity, where, like modern upkept buildings, and they were charged rent. But then essentially gangs had come into various neighborhoods and had essentially then just taken over buildings, like literally. Like there are parts of like the city that literally have just like resulted into like the collapse of the rule of law. It's like private police who do like various work like this, like trying to combat areas where the rule of law is completely just broken down. No doubt the people who are in charge, even though Black people have taken over, some people make the argument that they are. I know they're talking about like how it's bad for white people as the rule of law is not enforced, but also the rule of law is hurting Black people as they no longer have. I mean, they have like voting rights, for example. They have some political freedoms, but their economic day-to-day freedoms aren't really any better, and they're not really any more secure because the people who are in charge are corrupt and don't enforce the laws. Even though they didn't have political freedoms, the rule of law was better enforced than the previous apartheid.
Yeah, so Stefan Molyneux brought this up in one of his South Africa videos about how, I have a few actually data points to add to this. So about how the average life expectancy of a Black person in South Africa is actually lower now by about 8 years than it was during apartheid. So that's pretty dramatic. But also there's some other things South Africa by the homicide rate is the 8th most dangerous country in the world. The murder rate is 34.27. 34.27. Now, that's per 100,000. There are like 200 countries in the world, so that's crazy.
I mean, like Syria, Libya, Iraq, like those are like definitely, those are pretty fucked up, crazy countries. But, civil wars are happening, so it must be.
Libya actually has a very low homicide rate, actually lower than the United States. You would think it'd be fucked up, but because Libya is the wealthiest country in Africa, they're actually doing better than a lot of people think. They probably don't count war deaths in the homicide rate, but I'm not sure about that. But the other one interesting fact I had to add about what you were saying about private security. Yeah, so there are actually more people employed in private security than there are in the army of South Africa. So that just goes to show how kind of absurd it is. So the crime there is, the crime's terrible. Things are bad. I don't know what the solution is to this, but I feel like the popular meme there of that it's all about land. I think that's really dumb. It reminds me, in a way, of like the Russian obsession with land expansion. People care too much about land. Land is stupid. Land doesn't have as much value as it used to have. What's going on in Silicon Valley? Just a few square miles of Palo Alto and shit. That's worth far more than anything that goes on in the entire Sahara.
Just look at Hong Kong or Singapore, which have some of the greatest economic successes of the 20th century.
So in South Africa you have the ANC, which is the dominant party. You have and then you have the center-right party, which the white people overwhelmingly vote for. I believe over 80% of white people vote for that party. I forget what it's called, but it's the center-right party. Then you also have some left-wing splinter parties. And one I was looking into is called the Economic Freedom Fighters. So they broke off because of the leader of the Economic Freedom Fighters' disagreement with the ANC and stuff. A lot of these groups are just, especially these small left-wing groups, are just really concerned about land reform. And even the center-right party, which is voted for primarily by white people, even they support land reform and giving some of this land to Black people that's owned by whites right now. And obviously the ANC supports such things. It's just this whole process is taking a long time. I just think that's not going to help the situation at all because now, obviously I don't believe that Black people are inherently stupid. I think that's a dumb meme. If Black people haven't owned these farms, they aren't trained well enough to run the farm. So my thing is, instead of land reform, just expand the welfare state. Better basic income. Obviously, you need better education and job training and stuff, but giving people land isn't going to do anything, right? The jobs of the future have nothing to do with land, right? Who wants to be a fucking farmer? They're not going to make that much money doing that.
Sure.
What you want to do is education, basic income. If you just had basic income in the country of South Africa, you could immediately, raise the average black income there. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, that reminds me of, I guess, the original argument for basic income from like Thomas Paine, who kind of said that because we have property ownership, a large chunk of the land has been taken up. The idea of basic income is that citizens have a natural inheritance that they're being deprived of by the fact we need to have property. So, it would make sense if you're saying the black people in South Africa are being deprived of their natural inheritance, and to actually give them this inheritance to just be economically. We've looked at things like Zaire, where they did do land reforms, and it basically turned out like terrible, as they just took the wealth from the white farmers who ran the farms very efficiently and just made a bunch of ineffective small farms.
Yeah, exactly. But this goes back to the discussion we were having the other day about small businesses, owning capital versus large businesses owning capital. Large businesses, which tend to be more efficient, I'd rather them have the capital. So just like with farms, I'd rather the most efficient person who can run a farm be running the farm, right? So, but at the same time, that efficient person who's running it, I want to tax them to help, everybody else. I feel like this is such common sense, and people just, I don't know why people don't think of that. I think it's because of the symbol of land, right? It's a symbol of colonialism and stuff. And I understand that to an extent, but that's just such an emotional kind of thing. I do understand, if you're attached to your homeland, it's been taken from you, right? This land that your ancestors have been on. I can understand it to an extent, but this is politics. Let's be practical here, right? Let's get you the economic justice that you deserve. Let's not just give you land.
Bazobaleka sizobajula ngempama bazobaleka uliphulu sizokushaya uzotutshulwa uliphulu sizokushaya uzobaleka sizobajula bazobaleka jula sizobajula bazobaleka jula uliphunu uzokushaya uzobaleka jula uliphunu sizokushaya uzobaleka tu ikhabhinethi soyijula uzobaleka jula ikhabhinethi soyijula uzobaleka jula uliphunu sizokushaya uzobaleka